Welcome to the Leadership Edit, a podcast by CXO Steps, where we talk about what it really takes to lead today. In each episode, we sit down with expert coaches, senior leaders, and thinkers to unpack the shifts, skills, and stories that matter. Whether you're already a CXO or on your way there, running your own business, or just serious about growing as a leader, this is for you. Today, in our very first episode, we're diving into a topic that hits home for many ambitious professionals: visibility, self advocacy, and C suite readiness. I'm your host, Akansha Singh, and we're so glad you're here as we kick off with episode one. I'm thrilled to welcome Tiffany Barnard, a seasoned certified professional coach and one of the all time favorite executive coaches in Spain and globally. With over 3 decades of entrepreneurial experience and a certification backed coaching practice, Tiffany has guided countless CXOs and entrepreneurs towards meaningful transformations in their leadership journey. Her coaching style is insightful, practical, and deeply empathetic, helping leaders align personal and professional goals, build an impactful presence, and confidently navigate complex business challenges. Now, from all of us at CXO Steps, we're delighted to welcome Kevna Shah, who's our moderator for today's session. Kevna is a senior consultant and brings over 15 years of experience in human resource, along with a deep passion for learning and self-development. Kevna will now take it forward and ask Tiffany some really insightful questions and kick off our discussion. So over to you, Kevna.
Thanks, Akansha. That was a very, very kind introduction, I'm sure. Tiffany, let's make it more conversational from here, and we'll also want to deep dive into your experiences and expertise. We've all read theories in our CADs, but what makes most sense is what actually comes into practice from all that theory that we've learned, right? And I come also from the Indian subcontinent, where typically self-advocacy, visibility is not something that is considered a strength. It is mostly frowned upon. So how do you think, mind shift change from that perspective is required to build visibility as a leader? Because so far you've always backed on the concept that your work shall speak.
This is very, very true. And it is an idea that is shared by not just the Indian subcontinent, but also spanning Asia and going into Europe. It's part of our culture that if we talk about ourselves, we appear arrogant. It's rude sometimes. And it's very difficult now to change that mindset when you come into the workplace and to actually talk about what it is that you've done. Interestingly, people are very good at talking about what their team have done. And this can also create problems because they talk about they talk about my team, and they tend to leave themselves out. The problem is the idea of I will work hard and my work will be recognized is for the large part not true. Because there are people in the workplace who are talking about themselves and are often talking about work that you have done, and they're taking credit for themselves. So you ask how to change the mindset. I believe that if we're telling the truth, it's not bragging. It's not arrogant if we are telling people what it is that we have done, if we are letting people know what it is that we are good at. Of course, there are ways that we can do it that make us feel more comfortable when we're doing it. I will never suggest to any of my clients that they should go onto social media and start shouting about how wonderful they are. However, when it comes to performance reviews, for example, this is a very, very good opportunity to be able to just categorize the wins that you've had, the impact that you've had on your team, and what your strengths are, what the strengths are that allowed you to do that. And that is done in a way where it's appropriate and it's sort of contained. And it is important because very often our leaders have more than one person that they're dealing with. They have, their own jobs, their own worries, they have their own preoccupations. And assuming that they're going to have everything that we've achieved top of mind is sometimes a little naive. So it's better to give them what I would call a kind of a cheat sheet. It's like those bullet points, what we've done, what we feel is important, And this allows them to be able to take that forward on our behalf.
Absolutely. And when you are actually at certain levels of your career, possibly what you have done is looked at by the immediate manager, and you possibly get rewarded or recognized through that. But when you are deliberately and consciously positioning yourself for the next coveted role in the C-suite or even as an entrepreneur, uh, that time, that entire piece of visibility being shadowed by my team has worked or my company has worked needs to come pretty much in the forefront. And I think what you put out here, authenticity, not bragging, but actually talking about your real story, makes more sense. But do you also see leaders, considering your own coaching practice, struggling with building that story or weaving that narrative together, and how best can they possibly work through that as well?
It's very interesting because I work mainly with high potential, high performing individuals. And there is very much this idea that, I do my job well and it's going to be noticed. There are also people who, when you give them a task, they'll complete the task and they'll let you know that the task is completed. They don't necessarily inform you of the obstacles that have been encountered in the carrying out of that task. And this is also something that I always bring attention to, because people are not going to understand your gifts and how good you are in accomplishing things if you don't tell them what you've overcome. This is now, you get very often, I'm faced with the yes, but and it's like, it's not a sign of weakness. You're not asking them for help. You're informing them of the process that you have undergone, because this is going to highlight what it is that you have achieved. You were talking about, getting people to know who you are, the visibility, the networking. This is also something else that people feel that, there's too much politics involved and it's not really what I like doing. I like those relationships which are meaningful. And unfortunately, if you want to go up to the C-suite, politics is going to become a large part of your life. And it is something that you need to find a way of managing in your way. Maybe you don't necessarily have to do it in the way that politics is all around us. We like the way that people handle it. Sometimes we don't. You can find your own way. And this is why a coach is a great person to have by your side, to help you find what that way is, to understand what your brand is. What is it? And it's a word that makes everybody cringe a little bit. What is your gift that you're bringing to the world? 3 people can do a job and achieve the outcome. However, the way that we do it, that part of us that we bring that makes that job slightly different, that makes the outcome slightly different, that's what people need to know about us. And if we don't tell them, they're simply not going to know.
Fair enough, right? And we know our story the best. So if we are not able to articulate, it is not really fair to expect them to know what we bring to the table, for sure. And I believe as a coach, you bring that out in terms of what your story is. Oftentimes, I see that we're struggling. If somebody comes to me right now and asks, okay, what are you great at? I am still struggling with an answer. I might have a lot of things to say. I might miss a few. So if I don't really have the cheat sheet, like you said, or somebody who's by my side guiding me, this is when you answer this, I think I pretty much missed the bus. And at senior levels, missing it can be extremely,
Costly.
expensive in more ways than one. Yeah. We do see a lot of functional leaders. You have grown as a COO, as a CFO, and now you want to go more into a business role, say a CEO or lead the business vertical in some form and fashion. And you lose the thread at that point in time because you have always been visible in your organization. You have possibly spent decades out there and you have always been that functional expert. Mm-hmm. So now how do you change that gear and how do you kind of become visible or sought as a business leader? Because when the organization is now looking up for a new CEO, they're pretty much looking outward rather than, being able to picture you. So how do we help leaders possibly, or what in your experience has been useful for the leaders at that juncture?
It's a very, very good question. And it's something that I help my clients by supporting them and understanding what it is that they want to achieve. And this could be a question that comes quite early on in your career. It's like, where do you see yourself in however old you are, at that point when do you see yourself in the C-suite? Where in the C-suite do you see yourself? And it's an important idea to have clear in your mind because it gives you the path that you need to follow. You may not know exactly how you're going to get there, but if you know that you want to become CEO at a given time in the future, then you know who you have to network with. And that's where the visibility comes in. It's the visibility is making sure that your visibility is not either just vertical, it's not siloed. Your visibility needs to be extended. Your visibility needs to be inside the organization and outside the organization. So having a clear idea of where it is that you want to go. Okay. And I always joke with my clients because I'm like, where do you want to be when you grow up? And it is that idea. It's like when you mature in your career, where is it that you want to be? Where is it that you want to finish your career? And it's difficult sometimes for people to begin to imagine that because it seems to be so far away. It seems to be so ultimately impossible. And the point is not to say, I'm going to do this. The point is to know where you're going. If you don't know where you're going, you never know when you've got there. And you have to have the idea of which path you want to take so that you can take the steps early on in your career.
And that entire shift from being invisible to being the influential within the organization ecosystem is equally critical, I believe.
Yeah.
You cannot just move when you have to, but you have to start that journey probably a little before.
I mean, like if you're looking to move house, for example, you're not just going to pack up your stuff into boxes, get in your car and drive around and stop at the first place you see. You have an idea of where it is that you want to go. So you start looking, you find the ideal place, and then you start taking the steps to move. It's exactly the same. And it's not to say that your journey will stay fixed. Some people, especially early on in their career, they're like, yes, I want to be CEO and master of the universe. And then they realize as they progress in their career that in fact that's not what they want. Some people decide they would like to stay a doer rather than an overseer. Some people like being the expert. Some people want to take it further up. Some people stop because of the politics. Other people love that and they want to be able to really have an influence over the whole thing. So, every day that we pass gives us more information on who we are and what we want. And there's no problem in changing your path.
What I hear you also say is, I think the first clarity that you get, and possibly that is where a coach kind of helps you unclog, is understanding yourself a little better. The world says that you are head of XYZ. Now you need to be the CXO of XYZ, because if you're a business head, you become a CBO. If you're a finance head, you get and become a CFO. Or now you're a CFO, so now you should become a CEO. But do you see yourself there, or do you find yourself at unease in those ecosystems? Is what you need to first deep dive into before starting to prep on that journey itself.
And in fact, if I would take it one step further, and I would say that any kind of leadership starts with personal leadership. We have to know who we are, what we want. We have to be able to go through those processes and to have the awareness so that we are aware enough and enlightened enough to lead others. And I think it's very obvious in the business place, those leaders that a high degree of personal leadership compared to those who don't. And I think it's very obvious where the paths go. I think the personal leadership is very important. I mean, understanding ourselves means that we can see it in other people also. If you want to be a leader of people, a people manager, I think it's very important to have that element of personal leadership.
And it is so interesting that most of the people, when we talk about leadership or traits that make you a leader or a visible or influential leader for that matter, a lot of times, we believe that it is a lot of fluff, but there is a lot of science around it. There is actually a lot of clinical thought that has gone around it, the psychology that has got around it, and after which you have frameworks through which you can work with. So a lot of times we believe that all of this is organic. It's not actually as organic. You have to put in a lot of efforts. You have to put in a lot of, you need to get that support and you need to seek that support out possibly to get there. What is the kind of resistances, if at all, you felt when people move or click from that mind frame?
It's interesting because I believe that we're all leaders. We're all leaders in our lives in some capacity or another. One of the strongest parallels that you can draw in leadership is those of being a parent and being a leader of a team, because the skills that you use at home with your children are exactly the same skills that you will use with a team. And I do not mean that to diminish the team at all. When you have children, you're there, you get involved. in the psychology. You get involved in conflict negotiation. You get involved in conflict resolution. You are trying to empower them, to autonomize them, to allow them to grow and be successful on their own. And you're doing exactly the same with teams. And I think people tend to get very stuck with the definition of leadership. You know, they have this idea that when you talk about leadership, they somehow feel that they need to suddenly become Bill Gates. And it's a question of no, it's a question of understanding, what does leadership mean to you? What kind of leader do you want to be? We are all already leaders. It's just understanding that we have the capacity. Because some people are like, no, I'm not a leader. I'm not that person. You're like, what is that person? What does that mean? What is that person? So it's getting people to understand what their strengths are, getting people to understand how those strengths are what makes them dynamic, important, special, unique, because we're all perfectly unique exactly the way we are. And the coach is also there to help you understand how you can use that in the context of being a leader. Leadership is a big word. It's a heavy word. People often have resistance to it because they feel that, you know, it's not possible for them. But when you
slotted as being strict, or you're being slotted as being more business over people, or what have you, you have an image.
Yeah, there's a lot of responsibility there. Or, you know, again, I come back to the politics. Some people don't want to be leaders because there's politics there, but you are a leader already. And then very often the leaders are not the ones with titles. Very often there are instances where the leaders are not the ones with titles. So it is a question, I think, of understanding what leadership actually is. And again, coming to personal leadership, if you understand what personal leadership is, then it is less frightening to become a leader of others. So I think it comes down to defining it.
Super, sounds good. Any specific tips and tricks that you would want to share when we say that, you know, I want to be known as a leader, I want to be touted a leader without necessarily tom-tomming about it, because that doesn't come naturally to me, like I said. How do I still be visible? I don't necessarily want to broadcast it over social media or when I'm talking in my circles, but I still want to be recognized as one, or I still want to be identified as one.
I think one of the things that helps a lot of people advocate for themselves is understanding that when you as a leader advocate for yourself, you're also advocating for your team.
So it's not only self-advocacy is what you're saying.
Exactly. Leaders would not exist without the teams, and teams do not exist without their leaders. So it is a very symbiotic relationship. And somehow, if you are quiet about what you've achieved, it's also to the detriment of the team to a certain extent. So it's a question of, this is what we've done together. These are the skills that I used in order to do that. You know, it's strong teams have strong leaders, and strong leaders are aware of the impact they have on their teams. And it's talking about that, is talking in very sort of factual terms, and it's talking to the people who matter, because when you talk to the people who matter, they're listening, and they're not going to go, oh, such an arrogant person. No, they're going to be interested. This is what I'm saying. It's not about going on LinkedIn and singing your praises there. No, it's about talking to the people who matter, about the things that you've achieved, about what would not have happened if you hadn't have been there. It's about being honest with others about who you are. And it's understandable that it feels uncomfortable because we're brought up not to talk about ourselves in many different cultures. It's also uncomfortable because we don't really know what our strengths are, because very often our strengths are those things that we are good at. And so we tend to think, yeah, but if anybody could do that, it's nothing special. I'm not special. So again, I come back to it, having a coach there. And to a certain extent, you know, leaders are coaches of their teams. So it could come from your manager as well. Having a coach there who is saying, no, hold on a minute. I want you to see you through my eyes for 5 minutes, and getting comfortable in understanding what it is that you bring to the table and being able to communicate that with other people. People need to know what it is you're good at, because otherwise they don't know when to call on you. And the example I always use, which is a very bizarre example, so bear with me, is that when you're cooking in the kitchen, if you want to cut bread, you're not going to use a spoon. All right. But the higher ups need to understand who does what, who's good at what, so that they can really draw on your skills and your strengths. And if you're not going to tell them what they are, then nobody's going to know. It's a question of starting. It's going to feel uncomfortable. Why? Because we're pushing our comfort zone. And when we feel discomfort is where we have growth. So keep that in mind. When you're feeling uncomfortable in what you're doing, it's because you're growing. The more you do it, the more comfortable you will be with it. Start with baby steps. Maybe choose your direct manager. Choose to share one thing a week with them about what it is that you have done in terms of I did this. And then maybe, expand from there. Maybe choose one other person who you could talk to and then just slowly do it. Don't try and talk to the CEO about how amazing you are on the first day, okay? Because it's going to feel horrible and you're going to back off and you'll never do it again. Baby steps, slowly. Keep a list of the wins that you've had. On a weekly basis, take 5 minutes, the wins that you've had. It will help you when you do your performance reviews because it will be top of mind, fresh. You can have all of those things for the whole year. You're not going to have recency bias, so you won't be just concentrating on that 1 month. And having written them down, you start to understand that you are of value, you are bringing value. And why else would people want to employ you if you're not bringing value?
Sounds great. And I think coaching in that sense, or a coach gives a complete fresh pair of eyes, a person who's not biased, who doesn't have any access to grind in your performance or appraisals, so to say, and absolutely neutral to what you are or are not and can be blunt about it. So I think that is definitely an interesting perspective. I think we have had an amazing chat so far, Tiffany, and I'm sure we'll have more of such chats in the future as well. Rejigging how advocacy means it's not self-advocacy, but it is about advocacy of your own authentic self, being visible for who you are, because if you don't talk, who will? I think that is what leadership is about, taking charge and being your own self. Great. And thank you again for your time. Thanks, Akansha, for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Tiffany. Thank you, Kevna. I do agree with Kevna a lot. This was extremely an insightful conversation. Thank you so much again, Tiffany, for joining us and giving your time to us.
My pleasure.
And that brings us to the end of episode 1 of the Leadership Edit. And we're so glad, ladies and gentlemen, that you chose to spend your time with us. At CXO Steps, we help CXOs, future CXOs, and entrepreneurs grow with intention through tailored one-on-one executive coaching from some of the best coaches across the world, like Tiffany. So visit www.cxosteps.com to learn more and follow us on our social media channels for more updates. And stay tuned, because we've got more episodes coming soon, each packed with real stories and real insights to help you lead with clarity and purpose. See you next time.